listen to the guys he proposed. My father, he proposed a killer. John Gotti, he proposed a killer. Gene Gotti, he proposed a killer. Angelo Quack, he proposed a killer. Johnny Koenig, he proposed a killer. Everybody he proposed did work. In the mob, they call murder work.
This is Inside the Life with Giovanni and Dutch, produced by the Mob Museum. Giovanni, Rocco, and Dutch McAlpin are former police and federal task force operatives. They infiltrated drug cartels, outlaw motorcycle groups, and the mafia. Now, they share their stories, along with others who have gone inside the life.
Welcome back to Inside the Life. It's impactful. I mean, it was more than I thought it was going to be.
It felt very transparent. Yeah. I think something that resonates through the whole interview is how impacted he was, that he was raised by his father to be a gangster.
And even the act of being involved in his own brother-in-law's murder, and the aftermath of that.
He talks about not only the crimes they were committing, but how they were committing them, how he felt about committing them. It's interesting, and on the one hand, he can so callously and so coldly describe planning and participating in a murder, and then while he's locked in prison during 9/11, express so much sympathy and empathy for law enforcement.
Yeah, you see the story of redemption, and you see that pivotal moment when he transformed. His acts of kindness now, what he does today with the recovery stuff, and have his impact on a community. He could be somebody that, telling his stories makes him a hot shot, makes him a big shot, but he's not that guy. He's a very humble guy.
You're going to get a lot of really, really good detail, probably things you won't hear anywhere else but on Inside the Life.
Yeah, and with that, here's our interview with Anthony Ruggiano Jr. So here we are at the Mob Museum once again, and we want to thank you for being here and being our guest today and diving into your life. I feel like I just want to sit back and just watch like everybody else, but if there's any insight you could share with your growing up in your childhood and how you came up in Ozone Park.
Yeah, so, I just want to say that thanks for having me, and I'm, to be back in Vegas is like, I haven't been here since 1977, and a lot has changed, let me tell you, a lot. When I was a kid, I didn't know I knew my life was different than other people, but I didn't know why, and I knew my father was different than other guys, my friends' fathers, and even my uncles, but I didn't know why. When we walked in a room, like the atmosphere changed, and I felt that as a child. I felt like the atmosphere changed when we went to restaurants. Like we would go to restaurants and there'd be all people waiting outside for a table, and we would just walk right in and sit at a table, and it wasn't like that with other, with my friends when I went out for dinner with my friends, but I really never knew the reason why. And it's funny because, when I used to go to school and they would ask me what your father does for a living, I would go home and say, Dad, what do you do for a living? And he would tell me I work in the dry cleaners, right. And I knew that was bullshit. I knew, but I didn't know, and I rolled with it. And I would go to school as a young child and say, my father works in the dry cleaners, but I knew that wasn't true. And, there was some trauma in my life, he got arrested a few times when I was a little kid, I remember once I was he used to leave his car door open for me and my brother. We used to play taxi, and my brother would sit in the back and I would be the driver. And I remember one morning we were in his car and we were playing taxi, and the next thing I know, the street got blocked off and people were running all over with shotguns, and they knocked on the car window, and I started crying, and the guy said, "Where's your father?" I went, "He's upstairs," and they locked him up for income tax evasion. They took him out of the house, and so, there was a lot of stuff going on in my childhood, but I didn't know the reason why,
Was other kids in the neighborhood and other people, did they share with you? Were they like, what do you mean you don't know what your father does or where he is? Like, were they intimidated and scared of him?
That's a good question. We all stood on our block back then. We played on our block. So when I was like 12 or 13, I drifted off my block into the neighborhood, and I started going to this pizzeria on 101st Avenue. And then when I got there, the older guys would say, Fat Andy's son, and I heard it. They would say, that's Fat Andy's son, and that's when I found out about the mob. And then I started getting treated different, special from the older guys, because they wanted to now get up my father's ass, whatever. Yeah. And I liked it. I liked the feeling of being special, and that's when I started finding out about the mob. And then my father got honest with me, and then so. I lived in Ozone Park, and every mob family had a social club. I mean, the Genovese family, Cero Perone, he was a captain with the Genovese. He had a club. Vinny Asara, he was a captain with the Banner family. He had a club. Charlie Wagons and John Gotti, they had a club. So everybody had a club in Ozone Park. So now when I was hanging out in the neighborhood, now my father started taking me around to all these clubs and introducing me to them so they would know I was his son, so I wouldn't get beat up, or you know, if I got in trouble, they would look out for me. And that's the first time I actually met John Gotti.
What's it like walking into one of those clubs? Like, what's the atmosphere of that? I can't imagine what it's like to be in a social club. You guys probably both been in one. Like, is it all gangsters in there? Is there regular people
No,
in
there's
there?
regular legitimate guys, you know, people that grew up with them. You know, like my father's club, there was always legitimate guys in there, but legitimate like in the gray area. You know what I mean? Like they grew up in East New York. They went to school with my old man and Tony Lee. But there was mostly criminals. I mean, but there were definitely legitimate guys, and I liked it. You know, I knew Charlie Wagons. Charlie Wagons was a made member of the Mangano family with Albert Anastasia. So now when I found out who my father was, and he told me he got straightened out by Albert Anastasia in 1953, the same year I was born. I'm old, but I know I look good. But anyway, so he told me that was the best year of his life. He became a made member of the mafia and a father. And I go around and say, yeah, lucky me. Like, he couldn't open up a barber shop or something, you know? So I was literally born into the mob. Like, I know, so I hear people, you know, they went into the mob because they were infatuated by them, the way they dressed, the way, I literally, that's all I knew from birth. You know, like actually when I got sentenced for, well, I know we're going to get into it later, but when I got sentenced for the murder, the judge, Weinstein, asked me, how long have you been associated with the Gambino family? And I really meant it. And I said, since birth. And he thought I was kidding around. He goes, what do you mean since birth? And my lawyer says, no, Your Honor, his father was made. And I was serious. He thought I was like making a joke. You know? So he told me that he got straightened out by Albert Anastasia. The books were closed. He was a special case because he committed murders. And then he told me about the first murder he committed. So these were my childhood stories. Now I'm a teenager, and he's telling me about, and I loved it. Like, I was like, oh, damn. Like, I was so infatuated with it.
Well, Ozone Park at that time, it was a safe haven, right? I mean, it really was. It was like you lived in a bubble. I lived in a neighborhood like that in Jersey, but it mirrored each other. You had this feeling of security and safety. Nobody was really going to mess with you. But more so with you, the insight you give as a made guy's kid. That's stuff we never really talked about on our show because we never had the ability. Again, growing up before you were 16, going way back to when the light got a little brighter each time you went out. And I was sharing with Dutch, my growing up was I hung around with made guys' kids because you got a little bit of extra treatment. You got access to places maybe you shouldn't have. And I explained it as hanging out with a made guy's kid. If we got caught cutting out of school or we did something to school, I knew the punishment was going to be a little less harsh because I was with Anthony. I was Fat Anthony's kid. It was hanging out with me, you know, as if opposed to if I got pinched with Dutch, I'm going to get 2 weeks suspension. They might go easy on me because I was with you. So did you see a lot of that, people gravitating towards you?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Even the older guys. So when I started hanging out at this pizzeria and the older guys knew who I was, and then I found out who I was, they used to take me, and I'm 16, now I'm getting older, I'm 14, 15. They started taking me to bars. Now I would go to a bar at 15, 16, and the owner knew I was Fat Andy's son, and I drank. And now I'm making money. Not only am I 16, I'm making money. I got hundreds of dollars in my pocket. This is 1970. Well, money was money. So I'm going in bars now, and I'm Fat Andy's son, and there's 25-year-old barmaids that are gorgeous. They're going out with me. I'm 16. I'm giving them $20 tips. I'm Fat Andy's son. I'm taking them to the Copa. I would tell a barmaid, I'm 17. You want to go to the Copa Saturday night? Nah, you can't get it to the Copa. You want to go to the Copa Saturday night? Meet me here at 8 o'clock. Boom, I'm going to take them to the Copa. I'm in the Copacabana. You know, it was just it was amazing. And I got addicted to that life. Like, I loved it. You know, I loved it.
I was just going to say it's infectious.
We had every door was open because I was Fat Andy's son, you know, and I took advantage of it. Without a doubt, I took advantage of it. But, and I definitely got treated different, without a doubt.
When did you start running your first racket? Before you started using the weight of your father, what was the first thing you did?
I started smoking weed at 13 years old. It was the 60s. I hooked up with this couple of kids, and we started playing hooky from school. Because now everybody knew I was Fat Andy's son. I knew I was Fat Andy's son, so I started playing. I became a truant. I stopped going to school. My education stopped. But I wasn't committing crimes. I just was running the street. And then when I was 16, I got suspended indefinitely. Well, my father actually choked the dean. because the dean pushed me. They made my father come up to school. The dean said, listen, I don't want to see your mother no more. I want your father up here. And I said, listen, you don't really want my father up here. He goes, no, I want your father up here. He was this big German guy, Stockbrother, his name was. So I told my father, listen, the dean, what does he want to see me for? I said, he wants you up in the school. So he came up, and when I walked into the dean's office, I had a T-shirt on, and I wasn't supposed to be wearing a T-shirt because back then you still had to get sort of dressed. And he pinned me up against the wall, and my father jumped up and grabbed him by the throat. It was just a bad scene.
I'm guessing that your father went into that a little pissed off already because how dare you
without a doubt.
How dare you call for me?
Yeah.
You're calling for me. You're calling me to a meeting. So I would imagine that he already went in that with a little.
A few times you keep saying, you keep using the term straightened out. You need to get straightened out. Is that an example of getting straightened out?
No, straightened out means getting made, become a made member. They get straightened out. So anyway, they suspended me. So then we had to sit down in my house. My father, my uncle, his older brother Frank, and myself. And we're at the table, and my father told me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to work. He goes, all right, I'm going to get you in the bricklayers union. I said, I don't want to be no bricklayer. Right. He goes, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to work for you. He just sat back. I remember he just sat back and he looked at me, and then he leaned forward and he took his finger and he banged on the table. He goes, you want to work for me? Well, remember one thing, going to jail is all part of the job. And now I'm sick. I was okay with that because I was raised in that atmosphere. Yeah. Every adult I knew was a mob guy. I mean, every adult in my house, outside of my uncles and a couple of my father's friends, everybody was in the mob. That's all I knew. And the next day, he took me. There was a club on Merrick Road in Long Island, and this guy Philly the Pimp ran it. That was his nickname. And he had a blackjack game, and that was my first illegal job. Okay. So that's when I started, and then I put together a little crew. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, one of the members of that little crew are here now. Yeah, right. He's over there. And I put together a little crew, and then we started, writing numbers. Back then it was a different world than it is today. The Italian kids today in the mob, I don't even know what they do for a living. Right. We started writing numbers, booking a little sports, selling swag, untaxed. We started doing what mob, like in the movie Goodfellas, when they're selling the cigarettes. I actually did that. Worked in dice games. I did that. We were like in the minor leagues.
Well, the numbers, just so everybody watching, so that we all know what the numbers racket is in the football, but back then it was the football tickets, right? You made your football bets and they had the football tickets and you picked your teams.
And also in the racetrack, the three-digit number, the Brooklyn number, it came. So the racetrack, a lot, back then 20, 30,000 people used to go to the racetrack. Right. So every day they had the results. And then on the bottom, it was the track handle, like 2,300,000. $541. So the number would be 541. It was big money, and we would write numbers, and and that was the beginning. And I put together a little crew. We started hanging out in bars. Everybody knew I was Fat Andy's son. These were my friends. Yeah. And then it just progressed from there.
Did you have your own runners? Did you use somebody's runners that your dad had for the booking?
I used my father's offices. Yeah, we turned into work to his offices. Yeah. I had a half sheet with Blaze Carrazza. Okay. He was a bookmaker. That was my first half sheet. I became a runner for him. Right. And then things just progressed, from there. Then I started getting arrested. Then my father actually started taking me to the Ravenite. That's when I met O'Neill, the underboss of the Gambino family, because now it's the Gambino family. When my father started out, it was the Mangano family, and then Albert Anastasia got assassinated, and then it became the Gambino family. So I started going to the Ravenite.
And Neil Delacroce, who you're talking about, that's John Gotti's predecessor.
Yeah, he was the underboss of the Gambino family. And I started going to the Ravenite. Then I started running around with O'Neill's son, Buddy. And we definitely took advantage of being
who you were.
Who we were. Like, we even got in trouble. It's a funny story. You want to hear it?
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Yeah. So it's in the early 70s, and we're in this club called the Hippopotamus. It was like a private club in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And the only people that were in there were mob guys and celebrities. Like, you went up there, Ali, where Persico would be at one table and Liza Minnelli would be at another table. And it was a private club, and this guy Carmine, but it was owned by the mob. Yeah. And this guy Carmine owned it. So I'm in there one night with Neil's son, Buddy, my friend Sal, and myself, and we're sitting there with a bunch of girls, and we're drinking and partying. And the check comes. So Buddy leans over to me and he goes, "You got any money?" I said, "Yeah, I got about $60 on me." He goes, "The check is $700. Back then, that was crazy money. I said, $700. I said, "Do they know who you are here?" He goes, "No." I said, "What?" Carmine. I called the guy over that runs the. I said, that's Neil's son, right? Get out of here, really? I said, you mind if he signs the check? No, it's okay. So Buddy signed the check, and we left. Now Buddy liked it. Now we're all over town now. We're kids signing the Copa, signing checks at the Copa. Fat Andy, Neil was signing. Then his buddy's sister Tony got involved in it, and we're signing tabs all over Manhattan. So one day my phone rings, and it's Buddy. And he goes, listen, my father wants to see us. I said, your father wants to see us? I said, I'm like 21 years old. I go, what does he want to see me for? Right now I get scared, right? So I run upstairs to get my father, and he's gone. I tell my mother, where's Daddy? He goes, oh, he left. He left. What do you mean? Now, you couldn't reach nobody. There was no phones back then like today. I go, holy shit, now I got to go, right? So I get in my car, I drive to the Ravenite, and Buddy's standing outside, nervous, right? We walk in, nobody's in there, and at the back table, my father and Neil's sitting at the table. Now you got my father and the underboss of the Gambino sitting at the table. We go in, we sit down, and Neil goes like this in his pocket, and he pulls it, and all checks fall on the table.
Yeah.
And he goes, what's that? I looked, I go, tabs. My father goes, shut up. I said, shut up. So I sit there. He looked at me and Buddy. He goes, if you two sign one more check anywhere in the 5 boroughs, I'm going to break your fingers. And he said, your father's not going to say nothing about it. I said, okay, no problem. Buddy was trembling. But I really wasn't scared at that point because, I knew we were just going to, but Buddy was trembling because I think Neil used to go to work on Buddy. My father never hit me ever.
Okay.
So Buddy was kind of shaking. And so that was the end of our signing tabs escapade. But those are the things I took advantage of at a young age,
Did you have a conversation with your dad when he left?
Of course I did. I think my father wasn't as mad as Neil. You know what I mean? Because a couple of times I signed a tab at the Copa, and I would tell my father, listen, I signed the tab last night, and then he would go to the Copa and he'd pay it, So he was a different type of, my father was a gangster. He was a killer in the street, but at home he was a teddy bear.
Yeah.
He was he was very affectionate. He was a great son. He was a great brother, a good uncle, but in the street he was a gangster, but he was totally different at home. He never reprimanded, never hit me. He never had a father. That's why he got into the mob. To backtrack a minute. So his father died my grandfather died in 1932. My father was only 8 years old, and he never had a father. His friends' parents were mobbed up. His friend Lenny and his uncle was Happy Mayoni. He was a member of Murder Incorporated.
Okay.
And his friend Larry's father was the Dasher. He was a member of Murders Incorporated. I mean, these guys got the electric chair with Lepke. They were famous guys. So he grew up in their houses. So because my uncles, his brothers, weren't mobbed up. He was the only one in the family that got involved in the mob. So he grew up around these mob guys that were Murder Inc. Yeah. So they that's why he gravitated to that way, So
kind of like you.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
So he used to tell me, you don't know what it is not to have a father. That's what, and he never reprimanded me. And now thinking back, I wish he would have. Like when I got out of school, I wish he would have broke my ass and dragged me back to school. Instead, he put me to work in a blackjack game. Yeah.
So I'm keeping up on this. So now you're kind of working with your father, right?
Yeah.
So are you guys paying into the mob business or
well,
whatever?
I didn't have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
People were kicking up. So it goes, the associates kicked up to my father.
Mm-hmm.
My father would kick up to his captain, and then they would kick up to the administration. Yeah. But we made money together. Don't get me wrong. I did things that we all made money together, especially when I got older. When I got older, like his partner, Tony Lee, I made a lot of money with Tony Lee. We split it. I made a lot of money with Tony's brother. We split it, So we earned money together, but I never gave them an envelope like other people around them.
Even when you were booking, you didn't have to kick anything up?
No, I always was a runner. So, and the runner, and I always turned the work into his office.
Got it.
Like
right.
the book. So in other words, he had bookmakers with him.
Yep.
And I would be a runner for them. So they kicked up. They gave my father monthly, like this guy, Ronnie Cigars.
It was their job to kick up.
Right, Ronnie Cigars gave my father like $2,000 a month. Jojo Carrazza, when he was an associate, he gave my father like $5,000 a month.
Right.
So they would kick up. I would work with them and they would kick up. But I never personally had to do that because, he was my father. He wasn't going to take money.
Yeah. How
off
about
me.
any of the players? Like when you ran your book and somebody didn't pay out,
was gonna
how
ask
did how did that come to? Did you take care of that yourself, or did you go to your father?
Well, sometimes I took care of it. Sometimes I had to have a sit down. Like if they owed a lot of money. So there was a guy around the Bonanno family. He owed me $15,000.
Okay.
How old are you right now? Like 16,
Now,
17?
but now I'm older. Now
Okay,
I'm older. I'm older.
Yeah.
And he owed me $15,000. He was around this guy. I think his name was Bobby Metropolitan. He hung out on Metropolitan Avenue. He was a wise guy with the Bonanno family. So we sit down. It was me and Mikey Galatoni's brother. He was a maid guy. And we go, because the guy that owed me the money's father was with the Bonanno family. So I go sit down, and I tell him, your son owes me all kinds of money. And we made a deal. I made a deal for $7,500 because it's on paper. Bookmaking, there's no money. It's all on paper. So I made a deal for $7,500. The father paid me, and the kid couldn't bet no more. Another time, a kid from Jersey's uncle was a wise guy, and I had to get Jeannie Gotti involved because the guy was a captain.
Okay.
So I sat down with Jeannie Gotti, and we straightened down, and the guy paid me. So there was times I had to have sit-downs with other wise guys involved over stuff that people owed us money, or I owed them money.
Yeah.
Sometimes I owed money. You know, I was no angel. You know, I used to get in trouble too. But yeah, so that's how that worked. But sometimes I would take care of it on my own. But I never really had to get crazy violent with anybody. Like, you know.
Was it
Just
all
smack 'em
inside the
around a little or
Borgata?
something?
All inside the Borgata of the Gambino family, or did you branch out
No, it was
into
other families involved. Other guys, other guys. Like even with the numbers, like we were controllers, and the bankers, like Fritzie Giovanelli, he was a banker. He was with the Genovese family. We did business with them. We did business with everybody.
Okay.
Was there any like war going on? Was there people you need to stay away from, or neighborhoods you couldn't go to, like different families running different things? You know, like.
So I started using cocaine when I was in 1972.
Okay.
My father was in the music business. I was in Puerto Rico with Jay and the Americans, and I got turned on to cocaine, and I liked it. And everybody was blowing coke in the 70s. I mean, everybody was blowing coke. But in the 80s, it got like really bad. It got dark, and I started freebasing cocaine, which those were my dark days. Like from 84 to 88 were like horrible. And a lot of guys that were crazy guys were free. Like I was telling my friend the story yesterday. I'm driving in my car one day with my brother, and I hear a horn beeping, and it's Tommy DeSimone and Anthony Stabile. Two mad dog killers, like Tommy DeSimone, Goodfellas, right? And Anthony Stabile got gunned down on Crosby Boulevard by Banky. Like these guys were like, but I know them since a kid. Like Tommy used to take me out drinking with him when I was, in the 70s. I used to go, and they knew me, but I knew they were crazy. I pull over and I get out of the car, and they asked me if I wanted to come and freebase with them. They wanted me to cook it up. And I said, no, I got to go somewhere. I wasn't going to go with them. They might catch a delusion and say, if his father finds out, he's going to kill it.
Right.
So I went back in the car, and I told my brother, he goes, what they want? I go, they wanted me to go and get high with them. And he goes, and you said no? I said, yeah. He goes, that's the first time you ever turned anything down, because they were lunatics.
Yeah.
Another guy, Ray Argentina, I stood away from him when he was, only when they were using, when they were, like I knew, like when they got high, it was not a good situation, so I would stay away. But generally, no, I wasn't. I didn't like stay away from anybody.
Okay.
Because they were dangerous.
It wasn't any beef with the families.
Listen, I knew so many people that committed murders.
Yeah.
In jail, when I was in jail in 78, I went to jail in 78 the first time. In 79, I was in Art to Kill. I was in a 4-man room with 3 murderers. And another guy asked me one day, how do you sleep in that room with them guys? I said, I just feed them veal cutlets. My mother used to make veal cutlets and bring us up veal cutlets.
Fair trade.
So I was around, my father was a killer, so I was around these type of people since I was a little kid. So I was never really in fear of them, except when later on in life when there was drugs involved. Because people do.
Now, when you were running around doing the drugs, did your father catch wind of it, that you were running around the street? Because, again, it's great that you could say no to the Tommy DeSimones.
Yeah.
But eventually, you're going to run hard.
Yeah,
right?
no, it was bad. Yeah, so my father got arrested in 84 in Florida by the feds. So between 84 and 88, it really got bad for me. It got dark, and everybody knew I was using. My father knew I was using. It was bad. Like, I went up to visit him one day in prison, and he was just looking at me, and he wasn't talking, and I asked him, like, what's the matter? And he looked at me, and And he said, when I look at you, I want to go back to my cell and hang myself. Like he was just so upset with me, and it was terrible. And then I just woke up one morning and I was done. Like I just couldn't do it anymore. I was done, and I called up his partner Tony Lee, and I said, listen, come by my house. I want to talk to you. Because I wanted to get into a treatment center, and I had no money. It was, 1988. So he came over to my house, and we were in my kitchen, me, him, and my wife, Alice. And I said, I need help. He goes, you could say that again. You need help? He goes, because if you don't stop, someone's going to shoot you in the head. Because I was taking money off everybody. I mean, I was taking money off Johnny Knig. Like, I would take money off John Gotti. I was taking money off everybody. Like, I didn't care. I just wanted to get the next one. It was bad.
Yeah.
And
were you selling drugs too, or just getting enough?
If I could have
use
sold it, I would have sold it. I mean, I would have done anything almost to get it. I mean, I was doing violent stuff, robbing guys.
True addiction.
It was just bad. It's a miracle I'm still alive.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a miracle I'm still
1984,
alive.
Paul Castellano is still the boss of the family. Your
Right.
father goes to prison.
Right.
That's when you start your heyday between 84 and 88.
Right.
1985, that's when Paul Castellano gets whacked out.
So I'm sitting in my living room, and the TV flashes that Paul just got killed. My father was in jail. So I run to the phone and I call Tony Lee, and I go, they just clipped Paul. And he says, yeah, I know. And by the way he said it, I said, damn. Like he knew. Like he goes, yeah, I know. And then John became the boss. And John always liked me. For some reason, he always liked me. Even when I was using, he never abused me, never chased me. Whenever I went to him for money or help, he gave it to me. It was just one of those things. The guy just was always good to me. I think it was because I went to jail when I was young, and he knew I was in the street, I was in the street getting my hands dirty, and I think he liked that. We were both Scorpios. For some reason, he liked that. Like, he was born October 27th. I was born October 29th. And he used to talk to me about that we were both Scorpios. So he always looked out for me.
You had a kinship, something going
right,
with him.
and then he becomes the boss. Now I'm using, and he was still always good to me. And then we got up, we told my father the story. He wanted to know what happened, and me and Tony went up, and Tony told him what happened with Paul, and John's
I want
the
to
boss.
pause right there because 85, Paul Castellano hit, so everybody understands and everybody knows it's the famous hit outside of Sparks Steakhouse, right? Paul Castellano was a boss of the Gambino crime family. Paint the picture. Tommy Bellatti's in the car with him. Right. They both get gunned down right as Paul pulls up for it was a meeting or dinner he was going to.
With the captains.
We feature that here at the museum. We have an area. It's called Mob's Greatest Hits, and Paul's the crime scene with him in the car, and Tommy Lane in the street is there. But again, that night, I remember being a kid and finding out that my God, I mean, they whacked this guy out in public. It's a message. Yeah. What was the buzz inside the Gambinos when they? I would imagine it wasn't known right away that the 5 guys or 11 guys in Russian hats were John Gotti and Sammy and all those guys.
We were in Ozone Park. We knew that there was friction because of the tapes.
Yeah.
Because even Tony Lee, my father's partner, caught a case because of those tapes with the Teamster Union, because there was just tons of tapes. So we knew, and I knew they were heroin dealers. I grew up with them. I knew Jeannie was dealing heroin, Angelo Quack, Sally Quack, Charlie. I knew they were all dealing heroin because my brother had a big marijuana business. He was doing business with some of them. So we knew they were dealing heroin, and we knew Paul, how he felt, and we knew that Paul wanted the tapes. So they didn't have to tell me. I knew something was going to jump off just from, because I knew they weren't giving him the tapes.
Right.
And he got killed, even though nobody told me. When I saw it on TV, I knew it came from John because of the tapes. Because I knew they weren't giving him the tapes. And Neil had just died. I went to Neil's funeral. Neil had just died a couple of weeks before that.
Are you talking about the tapes that were made at the Ravenite Social Club?
No.
The
tapes that were made in Angelo Quack's house was bugged.
Okay. Quack he was selling dope in the street.
Right.
And
that's where the heroin
it was
deal
against the rules. Paul Castellano was old school with his brother-in-law and said, no, there'll be no dope dealing. And then what happened was Quack got caught, and then he got caught on the tape. They tried hiding it. They rugged it. And then Paul wanted to find out. And if these guys are dealing dope, they're going to get whacked out. They get, they broke the rules. They're going to kill him. So they kind of jumped the gun, right? Which is historically in the mob, like you broke every rule.
But were they mad because they were selling dope, or were they mad because they weren't paying up and weren't getting a cut?
No. So what happened was when the tapes were revealed and they were talking about heroin deals, Paul Castellano wanted the tapes to make sure that he wasn't involved, his name, and
Okay.
to hurt them because he wanted to make Tommy Bilotti the underboss, not John Gotti. So he knew that was the end of them once he got them. And they weren't giving him tapes. There's actually another tape in on Neil's bedroom with John and Angelo, and Neil's telling them, the boss is the boss. You have to give him the tapes. And Angelo on the tape says, I'm not giving them tapes up. There's friends of mine on them tapes. I'm not giving them, because then everybody would have got killed. And he wasn't. And Neil is telling them that he had to give them the tapes, and they weren't going to do it. Then Neil dies, and then the repercussions come. You know, I met with Sammy. Sammy told me the whole rundown. I just was in Sparks the day of the murder, the anniversary of the murder in December. I actually did a podcast in
Really?
Sparks, and I actually got Sammy on the Zoom phone, and I had him talking to the waiters. I brought Sammy. That was the first time he was back in Sparks since the day of the murder.
Really?
Yeah.
Not the same waiters. Same waiters and everything? Staff? Some of the staff?
No, it was a different waiter.
people?
But the maitre d' was there. He actually took me, because there's 2 rooms in Sparks. He actually took me to the room where the captains actually were sitting, because there were captains in the restaurant, and Frankie DeChico was there with a gun.
Right.
He was the only one that knew it was jumping off. So his job was that when the captains heard the gunshots, if any of them went to run outside, Frankie was going to, and Frankie did show them the gun. So when they heard the pops, Frankie lifted up his shirt and told everybody just stay at the table, and they all stood at the table.
Okay.
Frankie DeChico was in on the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I didn't,
That I got from Sammy. Sammy told me that.
You're
little
talking about
tidbit.
Sammy the Bull, right?
Yeah, Sammy, he told me that. So, you know, we all knew in Ozone Park what was going to come about it. He became the boss. That was 85. My father was incarcerated. Tony Lee was out, and I went to treatment. Tony Lee paid for the treatment because I wanted to get clean, because I wanted to get straightened out. I wanted to get made. You know, I didn't go to treatment to become some spiritual giant.
Right,
I went to treatment because, first of all, the drugs were killing me. I knew that if I didn't stop, they were going to kill me, and I was losing all of my self-respect and respect in the street. You know, everybody knew what I was doing.
Our credibility's gone.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
So I went to this treatment center in Vermont in February. Don't ever go to Vermont in February. It's fucking freezing. It was terrible. So I go to Vermont, and I'm there for 21 days, and I come out. I came out on a Wednesday. Now, John Gotti's the boss of the family. So I come out on a Wednesday, and on Saturday, he used to have lunch at the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club and hold court there on every Saturday, and I knew that. So Saturday, I go to the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club to see him, and I walk in, you know, say hello and everything, and he takes me outside, him and I. And he says to me, do you think you got a beat? And I go, well, I'm not going to do any of it today. You know, it's a Just for Today program, right? I said, well, I'm not going to do any of it today. And he says to me, well, is there anything I could do for you? I don't want you to get stressed out. Those were his exact words. So I says, well, I don't have a car yet. He goes, you don't have a car? So he goes in, he makes a phone call, because he had an office next to the Bergen Hunt Fish Club. And he comes out and he goes, okay, let Tony Lee take you to this car lot on 84th Street in Atlantic Avenue. He asked for a guy named Anthony. He's waiting for you. So I said, all right. So I get in the car with Tony. We go to the car lot. I walk in, and this guy, I said, you Anthony? He goes, you Anthony? I go, yeah. I said, John sent me. He goes, take whatever car you want. I said, damn, now I'm looking for a Cadillac, right?
Yeah.
There was no Cadillac, so I see this beautiful white Bonneville. Back then, Bonnevilles were cool, right? I see this beautiful white Bonneville with saddle interior, gorgeous car, like a year old. I said, how about that one? He goes, oh, yeah, right. Boom, I take the car, he plates it up. I drive back to the Bergen Hunt Fish Club. I show him the car, and he hands me $2,000. And he says, listen, here's $2,000. I want you to come here every Saturday with $100 and don't disappoint me. I go, all right. I leave. Now I went right back to work in the number office, and I'm now, as soon as I got out of treatment, that's my goal. My goal now is to make money, get back in mob things, get proposed, become a maid member. Now that's my goal. He gives me the $2,000. I tell my father on the phone, you know, John got me a car and and now my father, stay close to him. Now my father's living, what's that word?
The halfway house?
No, my father's in jail, but he's living through me now. You know, goes to this guy, goes to that guy. So
living vicariously through you.
Right, vicariously through me. So I go back 1 week, I give him 100. I go back the next week, I give him 100. I go back the third week. He goes, how much you owe me? I said, I owe you 1,700. He goes, how you doing? I said, I'm doing good. Now I'm looking good. I put on a little weight. I'm dressed up nice. And he goes, okay, keep the rest as a gift. So that was like my relationship with him. And then I started making a lot of money. I took over a vending company, but everything was illegal. You know, with Tony, I had chop shops, fraudulent credit card
So
ring.
now are you paying in now?
Well,
You
no, I'm
paying
not paying anybody, but people are making money with me.
Right.
Tony was making money with me. You know, they were getting a lot of appliances
people are
for
paying
free.
in.
Right.
And in a way, that's for your dad, even though he's inside, and for the life. Your dad is kind of earning through
Right.
you.
Yeah.
You know, even
yeah,
though
well,
he
Tony
can't.
Lee's his partner. They're whacking up the
he's
money.
putting you with these people, and he's allowing you. Was your father telling you, go see this guy at this auto body place?
my
Go
God.
see this
no,
guy?
my father was telling me, make sure you go see John every week. And then what happened was my father became very, very good friends with Joey Molina.
Okay.
He became the boss of now he's got a podcast.
Yeah.
That's another story for another day. But anyway, he was at that time a captain
And down in Philly.
in Philly, but he was in Allenwood with my father. Right. They became very tight. Mm-hmm. He introduced them to Lenny DiMaria and Nicky Carrazza, and they became tight. So when Joey Molina got out of prison, because my father sort of made me the go-between Lenny and Nicky and Joey Molina, and I was going to Philly meeting Joey Molina and going back to meet Nicky because John got arrested, as we know. I went to prison in 1991 for policy, for numbers. Right after John got arrested. John got arrested in December of 90. I went to jail a couple of months later, and I'm in prison, and that's when I found out Sammy flipped.
Okay.
By this guy, Bobby the Jew. That was his nickname. He was a wise guy. He came out to the yard one day, and he said, that guy's co-defendant flipped. I go, who, Frankie, the Chico? He goes, no, Sammy. I said, Sammy. I said, oh, my God, John's dead. I got out. It was different. It was different then.
That's my next question. How different was it? Like, how did the dynamic change?
It started getting different, and I started getting different, because now I'm clean a couple of years, and I started feeling uncomfortable in my own skin, but I wasn't willing to stop. I got out in 92. I started making a lot of money again in the street. I took over. I extorted this vending company. I took over this vending company from this guy, Stevie. And I was just making a lot of money.
What's a chop shop look like in the 90s? Like, what were you guys
We
doing?
were chopping cars. We had a stolen car ring, and we had 2 chop shops. We'd take the cars apart, sell the parts to, junkyards.
So you just get other people to steal cars?
Yeah,
bring
we
you
were
guys,
stealing
you
them
guys-
ourselves, too. We had a little crew we were stealing. I used to go out and steal them.
Yeah.
We used to steal 10 cars a night. We used to go to this Jewish neighborhood where there's all big apartment buildings up in Forest Hills, and we used to steal all the cars in there. 10 cars a night we were stealing.
Who buys, like, the parts and stuff?
Oh, yeah, everybody was buying the parts. I was
Auto body shops, everybody?
Well, we were selling them to junkyards, and then the junkyards would sell the parts to auto body
Okay,
shops.
gotcha.
Because it was different than now everything's got numbers, everything's
right.
computer. Back then it was a different world.
Yeah.
It was, there was no cameras.
You just get paid as fast as you can bring them cars, huh?
Listen, the way I made money back then, I could never do it today. I would
Right.
never. I would last a week. I would be in jail.
The level of trust, I would imagine, is you question everybody who's wiring, because you found out what's going on between the bosses and the guys running the family. It had to just send shockwaves through the whole thing, right?
Well, when I got out in 92, it wasn't as bad. I started changing on a personal level, but the mob started changing too. Now I'm in the street for 4 years, making a ton of money. I got remarried, and in December of 1995, my bell rings, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I know right away who it is. Like I said, oh fuck! I hear the bell ring, and I looked. It said, I'll never forget, in red on my cable box. It said 5:04 a.m. I went, oh fuck!
Yeah.
Right, I knew right away. And my wife wakes up. She goes, "Who's ringing the bell?" I go look out the window because I had a triplex condo, and she goes, "Oh my God, the whole street's lit up!" And then the doorbell, ding 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 ding. You've been there. Ding,
I've been the guy ringing the bell, so to
I've been the
say.
guy ringing the bell, right? Yeah. Ding, and then I look down. There's like 20 of them down. I open up the door. I open up the door. The first words out of their mouth, "You got any guns in the house? Weapons, right?" I say, "Yeah, I have no guns in the house." And they cuff me. They put me now. I'm sitting there. I'm on the couch, handcuffed. My poor little daughter's in diapers. Yeah. She's going, "Daddy, are these your friends?" And like,
it's hard on all of us, those moments.
And then now I'm in a 12-step program at the time. I'm staying clean. I got a couple of years clean. I'm not drinking. I'm not drugging. They take me away. I get out on bail.
You had to be thinking, I'm finally doing everything right and I'm clean, and they come today.
Well, I was still criminal. I was doing everything. Penny I got was illegal. I never listen. I had no skills. My father didn't teach me how to do anything. He taught me how to be a bookmaker. This was his thing. He used to tell me, as long as you go like this, you'll always be all right. That's what my father told me.
Right.
That was my life lesson.
That's your
When
gift.
I went to jail the first time in 1978, the day I went to jail, he comes down that morning. He comes to see me and he goes, "Okay, listen, this is another lesson from a father." He goes, "Listen, when you turn yourself in this afternoon, there's 2 things you could do. I said, yeah, what's that? He goes, you could either go in there and be stressed out and lose your mind, or you could go in there, get a book, kick back, and make yourself comfortable because they can't stop the clock.
Mm-hmm.
He said they can lock you up, take everything from you, but they can't stop the clock.
Yep.
So you're getting advice from your father at 16. Part of this business is going to jail.
Yeah.
As long as you can run a trigger, you'll be fine.
Yeah. They had
and get comfortable in jail.
Right, yeah, they had a going away party for me at the Ravenite. You would think I was going off to Harvard. You had to see the party they had for me in the Ravenite, the underboss of the Gambino. They had a big spread of food. Guys pat me on the back. Oh, don't worry, you're going to be, just tell them you know me. Don't telling me, schooling me how to go to jail.
Did they treat you like that in jail when you got there?
Oh, yeah, no, we had listen, the Italian guys have it really good in jail.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Well, in the state prisons, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the CEOs were very racist. So if you were a stand-up white guy, you know.
It was easier for you.
It was easier than, they were bad, upstate New York.
Yeah.
They were kind of racist, unfortunately. But I always had, everywhere I went, there was guys waiting for me. You know, I was Fat Andy's son, you know.
Yeah.
Everywhere I went, guys were waiting for me with a goodie bag, you know, foods, shower slippers. You know, they got me in a good block, in a good cell, a good job. Right. You know.
But when they came to the door and they rang the bell, what was the paper for? What were you getting arrested for?
It was a bookmaking case, which is legal now.
Right.
Yeah. It was a Queens and Brooklyn, the Organized Crime Task Force. So I get arrested in 95, and I'm sort of hitting the bottom in that lifestyle. My father's away. Tony Lee had died. His partner, Tony Lee, had passed away from stomach cancer. John was in prison. But he was still the boss. And a friend of mine came over and tells me, you think it's time to move on to step 2? So step 2 in the 12-step program was I came to believe that our power to greater than myself can restore me to sanity. And he took me on a retreat to this monastery called Graymore.
Okay.
And I met with this priest, and I really honestly came to believe it. And I went back to my childhood religion. You know, I liked being Catholic. I liked, you know, I was comfortable with Christ. I knew he was my savior, you know, at that point. And he became my higher power, but I still wasn't willing to be changed. You know what I mean? I took a plea. I got a 2 to 4. Mm-hmm. While I was in prison doing the 2 to 4, this is a crazy story. I'm in my cell, and every night at 6 o'clock, I used to listen to the news on the radio. Mm-hmm. And I smoked back then. So I'm laying in my cell, comfortable. I had a robe on. I had an ashtray on my chest. I'm smoking a Marlboro, and I got the earphones on. I'm waiting for the news to come on, and I'm smoking a cigarette, and all of a sudden I hear, and today in Broward County, Florida, the Gambino crime family was dealt a serious blow. And I'm listening, right? And I go, Nicholas Carrazza, Lenny DiMaria, Anthony Ruggiano Jr. I went, I jumped up out of the bed. And now they're saying we got indicted for conspiracy to commit murder and this and that. I'm going, oh my God. Now I'm locked in a cell. I'm up all night, stressed out. I don't know what's going on, right? The cell opens up the next one. I bust out of the cell. I run to the phone. I call my mother up. She's screaming, they're going to give you life. They indicted you for this and that. That, you know, like now I'm all fucked up. So then the marshals, that's when life changed, because now the marshals came and got me. They took me to Florida, and I got indicted with Nicky, Lenny.
Wait, who came and got you?
The marshals. U.S. Marshals came and got me. They took me to Florida, and I wound up taking a plea. I got 10 more years. That's when things started changing in my brain, you know. And while I was in prison, my father died. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When my father died, they took everything. That's when the mob guys that my father literally saved their lives.
Yeah. Came and took everything from your family?
They took my son's health insurance money.
Yeah.
Like anybody that was bringing my father envelopes,
picked at the bones.
Had to go to them.
Yeah.
They took my whole vending company, and they left me with 3 locations so I could earn a little money. They stopped giving my mother money. They abandoned my family. It was just horrible. But Nicky, Carrazza, and Lenny, we were all in prison. This was like other guys, Skinny Dom, Pizzonia, who in 1988, we killed my brother-in-law.
Yep, that's what I want to get at. Yep.
Yeah. So that's another life lesson, what you want to talk about, father-son relationship. So my brother-in-law beats up my mother.
Okay.
Chokes her. My wife comes down. She breaks it up. She tells me what happens. I'm in treatment. This is when I was in treatment. I get out of treatment. I go see Tony Lee. I say, you know, Frankie beat my mother up. He goes, yeah, I know. He goes, I said, well, what are we going to do? He goes, we're going to kill him. Now, like it didn't even faze me. He goes, but you got to go ask you if we're going to do it the right way. We're going to put it on record. Because in the mob, you got to get permission to kill somebody.
Is Frankie a mobbed up guy too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's mobbed up.
Okay.
Yeah, he knows the deal.
Associate or May guy?
Associate.
At that time.
But he knew the deal. He was an armored truck robber. He was a murderer too.
And we hit your mother. He probably knew.
He killed him and his partner, Peter Siccara. They were dangerous. They killed people. I mean, they were dangerous kids. He was no joke, Frankie.
Yeah.
We're going to put it on record. So I have to go first to see my father. So I go to the prison to see my father, and I tell him what happens. And my father, because mob guys are very egomaniac, they're egotistical maniacs. So now I tell my father that he beat mommy up. And he looks at me and he goes, what does he think? I'm dead? He made it all about him.
Yep.
He goes, what does he think? I'm dead? I go, evidently, he don't give a shit about you because he almost killed. If Alice didn't come down, she would have been dead. So I says, what we're going to do? And he okays it. Now, here's a father telling the son it's okay to go commit a murder.
Yeah.
Because that's the mob mentality. That's
right.
That's what you do. So I go back to the Queens. I tell Tony, my father said, all right. We sent for Jeannie Gotti because he was the captain. We sent for Jeannie Gotti, and we tell him to go to John. We want permission to kill Frankie. Now, John, he loved my mother. He really liked my mother. He loved my mother, John. And, of course, he okays it. So he okays it, and then we put the plan into, because now you got to be careful because he's dangerous, Frankie. So we can't just gun him down in the
This
street.
is wild. Like, you've asked 5 different people. You've talked ahead of time to 5 different people about a murder that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, right.
And this guy's dangerous.
Dangerous, yeah.
So you
but
probably
we
pretty
know,
nervous.
but none of us are gonna. It's gonna stay
It's
in
going to
that
stay
circle.
in there, yeah.
But who was Frankie's captain at the time?
No, Frankie was with us at the time. He was close to Cyril Perone. So he was like sort of with the Genovese family, but he was married to Fat Andy's daughter. So he was with us.
So he used your father for the same way that you had the protection, and he ran around in the street flexing his muscle.
He was
because
a
of his
guy that
father-in-law.
always went out with wise guys, daughters or nieces. Like before my sister married him, Danny Marino is a captain in the Gambino, a very powerful captain in the Gambino family. He came to see me and Tony Lee.
Yeah.
And he told me and Tony, listen, tell Andy's daughter, your sister, stay away from this guy. He's no good.
Yeah.
He went out with my niece. He took money off her. Bah, bah, bah. His niece used to come by my mother's house screaming, come out, you scumbag, come out. And I went home and told my sister to stay away from him. She didn't want to hear it. And she married the guy. So he was basically with us. So then we put the plan in motion. And he was a thief. He was a big thief. He was like a stick-up guy. He went to jail for armored trucks. So we knew that if we told him that we had a score for him, he might come. He would feel comfortable. So it was my job. I told him, listen, Tony Lee's got a score for you. Tony Lee knows where there's a drug safe house with money in it in South Ozone Park. He wants to give you the address, and whatever you get, we'll take a piece. But you got to come to the club. He wants to talk to you. So I said, Friday morning, whatever morning is, I'll pick you up and I'll take you to the Cafe Liberty to talk to you. So he agreed. So that morning I went. I picked him up. He got in the car. He had shorts on and a T-shirt, and I said hello, and we started talking, laughing. I drove him to the club. And
Did you have a knot in your stomach? Were you nervous?
This is what happened. I wasn't nervous because I couldn't be nervous when he got in the car because I couldn't.
That's what I'm thinking. He
but
would
I knew
know,
he didn't
right?
have a gun on him because he had shorts on and a T-shirt and he had shoes on with no socks. So I knew he had no gun on him because he never thought in a million years I would do that to him. He underestimated me. He just underestimated the whole situation. So when I got there, Mikey Gow, Tony's brother, was sitting outside in a chair. And he got up when I pulled up, and he got up. He came over, he kissed Frankie hello and said hello. And when we walked into the club, I heard him lock the door from the outside, and then I got a little nervous.
Yeah.
My stomach sort of did a little dance.
Yeah,
when I heard the door lock behind me, I got a little nervous. But at the counter, Tony Lee was at the counter. This guy, Freddie Hott, and Skinny Don Pizzonia was at the counter, and they had a big bowl of bagels, cream cheese. So we went up to the counter. We said hello. We made bagels. We were eating bagels, coffee, talking. Everything was calm. And then Tony Lee told Frankie and me, come in the back. He had a garden, a tomato garden. But come in the back. I'll give you some tomatoes. So we all went in the back. We went in the yard, and he made a bag of tomatoes with tomatoes and he gave it to Frankie. And as we were walking out to go back to the front, he grabbed Frankie by the arm and goes, wait here, I want to talk to you. And I kept on walking, And then I gave Dominic the 9, and Dominic took a gun out from under the counter, and he went in the back and he killed him.
Inside?
And he shot him. In the club, in the back room of the club.
Shit, man, that's intense.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah.
Now everything's got to stay normal. So I go, he tells me, go do what you got to do. Go to the club, go to the number office, do your job and all that, bop, bop. And now I know eventually my sister's going to start calling me, where's her husband? I mean, this is how nuts the mob is. Like, I killed my sister's husband. Like,
right.
That's fucked up.
Mm-hmm. And they're telling you, go look normal. Go get back to doing normal stuff.
So then I go to do my job. Now my sister calls me screaming, where's Frankie? He didn't come home. I go, I don't know. I dropped him off on the corner. I don't know. He said he had to go meet somebody. Somebody was coming to get him because we had a little pre-bullshit story lined up. I go, I don't know where he is. I dropped him off on your corner. What do I know? She goes, you got to come to the house. So now I go, all right. Now I go to the house. Who's there? The mother, the father, the sister, my sister.
Yeah, now you're probably starting to
You
feel
gotta
the
look
heart.
him up.
No. I actually went with the father to go look for him.
Jeez.
I mean, that's how nuts it was.
You're focused.
I got in a car with Peter Sakara, his partner, who was a murderer, and his father, and we went looking for him. And I knew, and he was in Dominic's trunk.
Looking back, do you think that was a way to mentally
body's in
disassociate yourself
Dominic's
from
trunk?
what happened?
Probably, yeah, because it didn't even faze me. I had no conscience. We had no conscience. That's what we did. It was just I was driving around looking for him with his best friend and his father for hours.
And his body's in the trunk
And
of
I
another
knew
guy's
his body
car.
was in Skinny Dom's trunk, parked in his alleyway.
Mm-hmm. And you've been so hardened to this lifestyle that
And the next day they took him on a boat and they put him in the ocean, and he was never found. But that's the mob. Now, wait, listen to this. Now, about a year later, my sister hooks up with a guy named Chris. This kid's a neighborhood kid, don't know nothing about the mob. He's just a kid that uses drugs. Now my sister's on drugs because Frankie turned her on to heroin.
Oh, wow.
So now my sister's got a habit, and she hooks up with this kid, Chris, who's just a kid from the neighborhood, don't know nothing about wise guys or nothing. And they get arrested for credit cards. So now my father, I have to go see him. I go see him in the prison. I tell him what happened. He goes, doesn't this kid know who I am? I said, this kid don't know nothing about wise guys or nothing. He goes, oh, no? And he looks at me and goes, well, you know what you got to do here, right? So I look and I go, what? I said, I'm not killing this kid. Are you crazy? He got mad at me. This is my father got mad at me because I told him I don't want to kill somebody. He says, what do you mean? I said, I'm not killing this kid. This kid don't know nothing about wise guys or nothing.
He's not part of that life.
Frankie was a different story.
Right.
He knew the rules. He was part of the life. He knew he was married and his friends, Frankie's own friends, told him, don't go with Fat Andy's daughter. Don't do it and don't do it. And he did it anyway. This kid didn't know nothing. I said, I'm not hurting this kid. So he goes, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I don't need you to do nothing for me. I'll handle it myself. I said, well, good, you handle it. I go back to the neighbor. Now I sent for this kid. I tell him, listen, you better run away because you're going. I said, you're going.
Yeah.
And now I don't see the kid no more. Now, I don't know if the kid's dead or not. I'm not even asking. I don't even want to know.
Right.
Like, I'm not asking my father, listen, did you hurt this kid? I don't want to know. This kid's gone, and I don't want to know what happened. About a year later, I get a letter from another kid, Chris, that hung out with me. He's in jail, and he goes, listen, there's a kid, Chris, that just hit the yard, and he's telling everybody he went out with your sister. Do you know him? And I said, oh, thank God he's alive. I said, he was in jail, but I was so happy the kid was alive. And I go, yeah, he's all right. And they started looking out for him. But that's what happens in the mob.
Yeah, you're bringing up an interesting perspective because on the one hand, you're talking about literally setting up your brother-in-law to be murdered, watching him be murdered, helping look for him, and it didn't bother you. And now you're talking about a kid, a drug addict, who crossed you guys, and you're like, nah, he doesn't deserve to die.
But he really didn't cross us. I mean, he was, my sister was using drugs with him. He was a kid from the neighborhood. He wasn't mobbed up. He just was a kid that made a mistake. And now I'm in recovery, so I understand what's going on. I understand addiction. I understand what it is to
can
be.
sympathize.
Right. So, if he was in the mob, it would have been a different story. I might have had a different frame of mind, and we might have killed him.
Right.
But I didn't, and I was glad he wasn't killed. Fast forward, now I get arrested in '95. My father dies, and that's when everything changed with the mob. Different guys. Pete Gotti became the boss. He was a jerk off. I never, he was a sanitation worker that became a May guy, and they took everything. They took everything from my family. They took everything from me,
What, were they mad at you or
No,
something?
no,
or did
they
just
weren't.
think that
They
that
were
was
mad
owed
at
to
my
them?
brother. My brother had an argument. They gave my mother a bill for my father's funeral, and my mother got upset, and my brother had an argument with them. So, and they used that as an excuse to take everything. And in the mob, there's a rule. When a wise guy dies, everything that's illegal goes to the family, the mob family, and everything that's legal goes to the immediate family. And then it's up to the mob family if they want to give anything illegally. So
Back to the
realistically, if they were good people, they would have gave everything to me.
Right.
Because I was in prison. I was proposed to be made. They should have gave everything to me, or at least gave me half. They gave me nothing. Not only did they give me nothing, they took from me.
Right.
They took what people were bringing me. They even took, claiming that it was
family,
my father's, but it wasn't. It was mine. But they claimed it belonged to Fat Andy, so they were entitled to it. So now when I do 8 years and 3 months. I get out while I was in prison. So technically I was on record with Skinny Dom and Mikey Gal. Before I got out, Nicky Carrazza had me transferred to him.
Okay.
Because you could do that. So in the mob, you could get transferred from one crew to another crew, from one family to another family, you know, so I put in for a transfer. So Nicky transferred me to his crew. So I got out in 04. I meet this guy Nunzi, who was a made guy. He says, your savior got you transferred. I said, my savior. I said, who's my savior? He goes, Nicky. I said, Nicky, Nicky's my savior now? He goes, yeah. Nicky got you transferred to his with us. You're with us now. I'm going to service you, and we're going to propose you again, put my name back in. Now, at that point, half of me didn't want it, and half of me wanted it. I was on the fence. But I didn't want to say no, because I really didn't want them to catch any delusions on me, because I knew, so I said, all right. And I had my first legitimate job at that point.
Okay.
I was driving a truck. I was working for my father-in-law, selling tuxedos, and then the feds came to the store, and he fired me. Yeah, they came to, say hello to me when I got out, and he panicked. He goes, oh, I don't need the FBI coming here. And this guy, Jerry came, and another FBI agent came to his store to break my balls. He fired me, so I had my first real legitimate job. I was driving a truck.
What were you delivering?
Carpenter supplies, gang boxes.
Okay.
Gang boxes to
wiring and
yeah. So he says to me, we put your name back in to get straightened out. I said, all right. And I had this job, and they put my name in.
Nicky proposed
me, right?
Johnny too, John Gotti. Right?
No, Charlie proposed John Gotti. Charlie Wagons proposed my father and John Gotti, both of them.
Okay.
A time goes on, and Lenny DiMaria sends for me. He's a captain. He sends for me, and he goes, okay, listen. He goes, you're done. Everything is okay. Your name went around. Everybody approved it. You have permission now to go on sit downs. You don't need any representation. You're equal now to a friend. We just didn't have the ceremony yet. It's going to be in a couple of months, but if you don't need, you could go, you're on your own. I said, all right, fine.
But you're represented.
A week later, I'm sitting on a bench in front of my son's house. The sun's out. I got my cell phone on my side. I'm sitting back like this. The sun's beating down on me, and I got all of a sudden I hear, don't move, you motherfucker. And I open up my eyes, and there's a guy in front of me with a gun right in my nose. Your friends, the FBI, right? Like this, boom. And then next thing I know, I get grabbed from the back, pulled up, and handcuffed. And they take me, drag me out of the courtyard. They throw me in a van, and they're screaming at me. You fucking murderer. You're going to get life now. We got you now, you scumbag. We're going to bury you. You know when they say a drowning person, the whole life flashes in front of their face? Well, that's how I felt. Like I was drowning, and my whole life flashed in front of my face. Yeah. And I'm in this van, and I'm handcuffed, and they indicted me for Frankie's murder.
You suppressed it and pushed it all down like it never happened.
Never happened.
And you're in the clear. So when you're sitting there leaning back and you got your cell phone, you're in a different mindset.
Never happened. Never happened.
That's years ago. I put that behind me.
Yeah, never happened. Wasn't even a thought in my mind.
Right.
What'd they base the probable cause? Where'd it come from? Did someone talk?
Well, this guy Peter. So what happened was when Frankie disappeared, his partner Peter Sicari, he was a dangerous guy. He kept on coming to the club. He knew basically we did it, and he knew what happened with my mother. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the guys that told Frankie to stay away from my sister. So he kept coming to the club. And then one day Tony Lee got really mad at him and said, listen, don't come here no more. We don't know where he is. I don't give a shit where he is, and don't come here no more. And he left. Sure enough, a couple of days later, he comes again. And I'm outside the club, and I see him pull up. And I said, what are you doing here? Didn't Tony tell you not to come here? So he goes, well, you know, Frankie was my partner. And then I told him, listen, I told him, if someone beat your mother up, what would you do? And he looked at me. That was an admission of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So when he cooperated, I got indicted for murder.
So he was wiring up.
No, he cooperated years later.
He did.
He cooperated. This was in 88. He didn't cooperate till 03 or 02. So this was years later. And then he cooperated, and another guy cooperated. My brother-in-law, Louis, cooperated. The guy in the back there, he cooperated. A couple of people cooperated, and they put it all together, and they indicted me and Skinny Dom for murder.
Right.
And with a RICO, with bookmaking, a whole bunch of things. And that's how they got this murder indictment on me. They locked me up in 05, and I was done. I was done, but I couldn't, you know, I was done. The mob was different. The guys were different. It was just a different world.
Mm-hmm. Safe to say you were looking for a way out at that point.
Yeah, but you know what? I still couldn't do it. For some reason, I never kept, you know, you just had them FBI business cards. Yeah. They always used to give them to me, and I used to rip them up and throw them out. For some reason, this guy, Jerry Conrad, he was the case officer on the case. For some reason, he gave me his card, and I felt like this vibe with this guy. I can't even explain it. Like, I felt like a connection with this guy. He, you know, he bought me a sandwich. I mean, he might have been playing me, but, you know, I just felt like this connection with the guy, and I kept the card, and I never kept the card. I kept the card, and I stashed it in my house.
Right.
And every couple of weeks, I would take the card out, and I would pick up the phone, and I hang up the phone. I couldn't do it. I would pick up the phone, and I see my father's face because he hated informants. I mean, he hated them, you know, and I couldn't do. I mean, he hated them so much that this might be crazy, but like I told my kids, when I die, bury me with my grandparents. I don't want to get buried with my father because I know he's mad at me. I mean, that might be a little nuts, but that's just how I feel. But anyway, I would pick up the phone and hang it up, pick up the phone and hang it up. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I was under house arrest. I had the thing around my ankle, and I couldn't do it. And I would hang it up and pick it up and hang it up. This went on for a year. Then I had some legal issues going, and I hired this attorney, this mob attorney, to help me. They called me one day, and they told me, listen, you need to call the FBI. You need to call the government. I said, what are you talking about? They said, these people are going to throw you under the bus. Because I was the last person with him. Yeah. So Dominic, my co-defendant, who actually was the shooter, he had a guy in a travel agent that was going to give him paperwork that he was in Florida the week of the murder. And when I told him, what about me? He said, you're on your own. I said, I'm on my own, right? So he had an alibi. I had no alibi. I was the last person with this guy, right? So the lawyer tells me they're going to throw you under the bus. You need to call the government. Then I saw this. Then the next day, I saw this other guy that was from the neighborhood that knew me, and he told me, what are you waiting for to call the government? I said, how could you talk to me like that? I go, I can't disrespect my father like that. He goes, your father's dead. He goes, you killed people for your father. Call it. What are you doing? You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison for these people? They don't even call you to see if you have a container of milk for your kids.
And they took everything from your family.
Took everything. I still couldn't do it. 2 days later, I got up, I got the card, and I gave it to my wife. I said, here, listen, take this card. And when you go to work today, she worked in Ridgewood. I lived in Comac. I said, when you go to work today, call this number and tell this guy to come and see me. I couldn't call. I couldn't make the call. Yeah. And she went and she called the number, and they came to see me, and I cooperated.
And it bothered you for a year when you finally sat down with him and started to talk? Was it like a relief?
It still bothers me that I cooperated.
I'm sure.
It doesn't bother me to the point, I'm not sorry I did it.
Yeah.
And you'd be doing time in prison right now if you didn't. Let's be honest. You know, when
Yeah.
you hit that wall, and again, it's a tough message. I've delivered that. He's delivered the message to people. Listen, when somebody goes, listen, Anthony, this is it. You need to get ahead of this, because if not, you're burning. Right?
Yeah.
And like you said, that moment of feeling like you're drowning and your life flashed before your eyes, people could point a finger at you and say you're a rat, you're this and that. Yeah. But if they're not in your shoes and they don't understand, that life has changed. The thing that your father had joined generations before, or decades before, it's a different life. There's no omerta in that life anymore.
No. And I know in my heart, and people that really know me, like I know in my heart, if my father was alive or Tony Lee was alive or John, I would have nenever done it. I would have never cooperated because I would have had to give up my father.
Right.
And Tony, I would have never done that. You know, they took me out of my house, you know, the whole 9 yards. They took me to a safe house in Jersey, then another safe house in Pennsylvania. Then they moved my family to Michigan. And then I went into the program by myself. They changed my name. I went to Idaho.
Here's a hard question.
Yeah.
Where's your sister at this point?
My sister, what happened was, so when I cooperated, I made the deal, I profited, and they didn't take me out of my house right away. About a month later, the day they were taking me out of my house, I made them bring me to my mother's house because I wanted to
You wanted to be the
tell
one
them
to
and
address
apologize
it?
to so I went to my mother's house, and I told my sister, my mother, what happened, and my sister flipped out.
Yeah.
She went totally crazy, screaming at me, hitting me, you know, she went totally nuts, and then she just ran away. How could you do that? You ruined my life. And she ran away. She ran out of the house, and she ran down the block, and it was bad.
Yeah.
My mother was just sitting there, not saying nothing. And then it was just her and I, and the agents were outside, downstairs in the house. And my mother looked at me, and she went to me. She went, I can't believe you made you do those things.
Mm.
She said, I can't believe he made you do those things.
Father.
Yeah. That's all right, man. That's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is powerful coming from your mom.
Especially when you talk about how hard it was for you to come to turn informant, if you will.
Yeah, that's what she said. She goes, I can't believe he made you do those things.
Because how much did your mom suppress along your life?
Yeah, my mother knew. So what happened was
She knew you guys whacked out
before the murder,
Frankie, right?
Before the murder, he was abusing my mother,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that. So what he was doing was he would drag her to the bank and make her take money out of the bank. He had my mother terrorized. He hit her in the head with his beeper one day because she didn't want to take him to the. He took his beeper off and he threw it at her, and she had a lump on her head. And I would say, Ma, what's the matter? And she would go, nothing. Then one day I told her, is Frankie doing anything? She went, don't go near him. He's crazy. He'll hurt you. He had Uzis stashed in my garage. He had flap jackets in the garage. He had an Uzi up there. You know, he was just and she was terrified of him. Then he finally put his hands on her. You know, like really put his hands on her. That's when we clipped him. And then and then she just told me, she goes, I can't believe he made you do those things. And you know, and I said, what are you going to do? And then I left with the feds, and then I went into the program and all that. And then I'm living in Michigan.
Did she understand? Was she like okay with you doing it?
She just felt bad that I had to do what I
Right.
did, and you know that I was in all kinds of trouble. You know, I think she was more worried about me than what happened to him.
Yeah.
And she was concerned, of course, about my sister, my niece.
Right.
You know. Then I'm in the program, and I get a call one day from a friend of mine that was living in Florida that knew I was still in contact with, and he was running a drug treatment center in Florida. He was the program director, and he goes, listen, this is out of the clear blue sky. Like, this ain't even a thought in my mind. He goes, listen, I'm the program director of this treatment center in Florida called Solutions Recovery Center, and I just had a conversation with the owner, Dan, and we really think that you would be a good counselor. I said, what are you fucking crazy? What do I know about counseling anybody, right? He goes, no. He goes, listen, he goes, with your life experience and everything you overcame, we really think you could be a good counselor, but you got to go back to school. Now I'm 60 years old at the time.
Yeah.
I go back to school. I said, I'm 60 years old. What school? I haven't been in school since
Right.
1965,
Yeah.
right? So he goes, no, I'm telling you, do this. He tells me I'm still obligated to testify because I didn't get sentenced yet.
Okay.
So my deal was that I had to cooperate until I got sentenced. Like that was the contract I signed. There were still cases that they were working on that I was involved in. So I called up Jerry Conrad. He was the head of the Gambino squad at this time. And they were giving me money every month. And I said, listen, Jerry, I'm going to do this. Oh, no, we don't want you in Florida. It's dangerous. I said, listen, Jerry, I have no skills, which I said, I don't know how to fix anything. I don't even know how to change a flat. I got a job in Michigan with this guy, with this company, and they gave me a toolbox. I called up my son. I go, they gave me a toolbox. He goes, what the fuck are you going to do with a toolbox? I said, I don't know. I said, if the truck breaks down, I'm just leaving it there. I said, I'm not fixing that. I mean, I don't know how to do anything. I said, Jerry, I have no skills.
Right.
I said, when you're done with me, how I support myself? I said, I'm going to Florida. I said, you will just have to watch my back. I'm going to, And I got my cat, Mikey the cat. Me and Mikey got in the car, and I went to Florida, and I went to school, and I became a counselor. I went to Florida in June 2014. 3 weeks later, the judge decides to sentence me.
Really?
Yeah. And now the government, they don't want him to sentence me. They want him to sentence me after they're done with me.
Yeah.
So they put in motions to get the sentence and postponed. And he said, I want this off my calendar. So now I go. This was really terrible. What happened? So now I have to go to court to get sentenced for murder.
Yeah.
Murder. And my niece is there. Frankie's sisters are there. My wife, my daughter. The sister gets up, and I'm going to give them impact statements. And the sister gets up. They cut because now they know how it happened. Like when they took him out on the boat, Tony cut his belly open and his lungs so they wouldn't blow up. And now they cut my brother like a fish. They threw him in the air, and she's carrying on. And then my niece gets up there. My niece told the judge to give me life. He made out he was my father because I took her to Disney World and all that. And meanwhile, I never knew what it was to have a father. And she told the judge to give me life. And it was terrible. It was horrible. My daughter is like, she don't know what's going on. Her father. My daughter, my poor daughter, she's in therapy because she found articles in the basement of my house about murders that my father committed and the murder I committed. And she's, oh my God, my grandfather and my father were murderers.
Yeah.
Wow.
But this is what the mob destroys families. We destroy our own families, and we destroy all the families around us. I mean, that's what we do. That's what they do. You know, I mean, and some of them, like John Gotti and my own man and everything, they don't give a fuck. They'll die like they die. That's how. Look how John died. He wouldn't even get pain medication because he was afraid he was going to say something that he shouldn't say.
I'm sure all those experiences helped you as a counselor.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Have you sat down with people and been able to relate?
So the judge was really articulate, and like when he sentenced me, he really the way he said, listen, he goes, I feel your pain. He told him, he said, but he's not to blame, me. He said the mafia is to blame. He goes,
wow.
And the mafia needs to be eradicated, and he is a tool for the government to do that. And he gave me time served.
Wow.
And, he gave me 5 years supervised release. I became a counselor. Yeah, because what happens is, so now nobody knew who I was. Everybody thought my name was Joe, right? Because my middle name is Joseph, so I use Joe. I don't want to say my last name, but the government changed my name.
Right.
So now sometimes I would get like a kid in there that thinks he's a gangster, and one kid was sitting in my office like this, and I'm sitting there, and he's got the tattoos, the gang tattoos on his neck and everything, and I'm looking at this. He goes, I was in the penitentiary and and he's, so I moved my chair up like close to him and like I'm like right, like we're like this together, like, and I said, yeah, how much time did you do? He said, I did 60 days in Missouri. I said, you did 60? I said, listen, my man, I did 60 days handcuffed on a bus in transit. I told him, he goes, what? He goes, you were in prison? I go, yeah. And then I told him I was in federal prison, state prison, and I had him, and I got him, and I had. You don't want to use it all the time. You want to be like therapeutic, but sometimes you got to use your
credibility,
right? And then I had him, but nobody knew who I was. But it definitely helped me. And then I did it for a couple of years, and then one day I get a phone call from my friend Robert, who's here now. And he tells me this kid, Johnny A. Light, who was John Gotti Jr.'s partner, who cooperated, wants to talk to me. Could I give him your number? I go, yeah, give him my number. So he gives him my number, and he calls me, and he tells me, listen, I got this guy in London, Max Stern. He keeps hearing stories about you and your father. He wants to put you in a show. So I said, he wants to put me in a show. I said, is he going to pay me?
Yeah, right.
So he goes, yeah, he's going to pay you. I go, yeah, but then, now I said, I don't know. And then, everybody's going to know who I am and and so I said, I'll get back to you. So I sat down with my kids and I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I could get my story out there. Maybe I could help somebody make a little money along the way. And this guy, Max Stern, called me, and one thing went did another, and I did this show on National Geographic, Narco Wars, the mob, drugs, bugs, and the Dapper Don. That was my article. and I did it, and then one thing led to another, and everything started rolling. Then people where I worked knew who I was, and now they don't know what to call me. They go, "What should we call you?" I said, "Just call me whatever you're comfortable with." And then it's funny because then my clients throughout the years that never knew who I was started DMing me because now I got to get on I had to get on social media and all that bullshit. And then, my God, I didn't know. I would have been more nicer to you. I would, because some of them were pain in the asses.
Right.
Oh my God, I would have been a nicer. I wouldn't have broke your balls so much if I would have known. And and I still do it. I still work in treatment. I'm not a counselor anymore. I'm a technician now. But
yeah, but Anthony, I think it speaks volumes to your character because you're not using the platforms that were given to you. Most people would say, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm dipping my toes back in the water. I'm somebody again, right?" They want to know my stories. It goes to your head. You become a celebrity. You used it for other purposes. You used it for outreach purposes to help others, to deliver that message of redemption. Because there's so many people that watch those shows and listen to your story, and it's not about people are going to call you a rat. People are going to say bad things about you, but they didn't walk in your shoes. And for you to use it the way you're using it, to have a platform to outreach to young guys like that guy that was sitting in the chair, that's a defining moment.
Yeah, and I get a lot of DMs of people out. Your story changed my life. I got clean because of you. I even help people get in detoxes and treatment
good
centers.
for you.
Me and my managing partner Pasquale, we people reach out to us all the time. To help them. People DM me. I heard your story. Now I got clean because of you, and it's very it's very gratifying.
Sure, it is because organized crime across the board is organized crime. Italian families, Asian, Russian, they're all the same.
Yeah.
And then when these young guys buy into it, we've all seen it. In our investigative side, and you living a life. It's just, they buy into this lifestyle. They're being sold a bag of goods. It's not the truth.
Yeah, like I grew up in Ozone Park. I was there since 1959. So there's still people I talk to that are still running around out there. They some people judged me and some people didn't judge me. My real friends that really loved me, they didn't judge me. The other guys that judge, like call me rat and stool pigeon, they never walked in my shoes. They never did a day in jail. I did almost 14 years in prison. When I hear people tell me I helped them, that they got into treatment, that's the deal. That's the gratifying part. Of course, I like to make money. I mean, I got to pay my rent. But that's where it's at.
So you made some kind of a deal and you agreed to provide information to inform against your co-conspirators. Like, who were some of the people that you testified against, and was there defining moments during those, ones that maybe bothered you more than others?
I made an agreement that I had to tell them every crime I committed and every crime I knew about and every crime I committed with other people. So the first trial I testified against was actually about my brother-in-law's murder. I testified against Dominic Bizzonia and Freddie DiCongilio. They got convicted. The second trial I testified at was against Charlie Koenig. He was a serial killer. I had a friend of mine named Michael. He stabbed him in front of the Blue Fountain Diner. He killed him. He was indicted for a couple of murders. I testified against him. He was dangerous. I had no qualms about testifying. And every time I testified, I would always make sure I stared at their face. Like I would walk in, and before I sat down in the witness stand, I would always look at them and look in their face because I didn't want them to think I was a punk or scared of them.
Right.
And I would never look down on the floor because some people would look. I always looked right in their face at first. I testified against Charlie Koenig. He got convicted. There was this kid, Johnny Burke, that used to date my sister years ago. He was another murderer. My sister always dated murderers. She was good at that. So this other guy, Johnny Burke, this kid, he committed a couple of murders with Johnny A. They killed this kid, Gebbit. There was a drug war going on, and he committed a couple of murders. That bothered me because he was my friend at one time, and I really liked him. But he had an opportunity to cooperate against John Gotti Jr., and he passed because his mother talked to him. He was going to do it, and then his mother was afraid for her other son, Anthony, and she talked him out of cooperating. And the Gottis don't even send him commissary money, I'm sure. I felt bad about testifying against him. He got convicted of murder. He's doing life. Then I testified against Cielo Perone. He was a captain in the Genovese family. I testified against him. I testified on big cases.
Right.
Then I testified against this guy, Bobby Glasses. So what happened was this guy, Bobby Glasses, and this guy, Frankie Gish, who were with my father in the 70s, they killed 2 innocent people in the Shamrock Bar. We were supposed to kill, that's another murder conspiracy I was involved in. I had to plead guilty to, but the guy didn't show up. My father, we were going to kill this guy, Frankie Gish, and I was going to meet him in front of the Esquire Diner and drive him around the diner, and Johnny Knig and Jeannie Gotti were going to kill him. And I was waiting in front of the diner for him to come, and he never showed up. His uncle showed up. So this guy, Bobby Glasses, that was in on this double homicide, got indicted by for the murder in a RICO. I testified at that trial about the murder and about the murder conspiracy, and he got convicted. And then the last trial I testified was against Vinny Asara. It was the Lufthansa trial. Mm-hmm. Now, Lufthansa, my father fenced all the jewelry for Lufthansa. So Lufthansa, when he was very good friends with them, with Jimmy Burke and all of them. When after they did Lufthansa, the robbery, and they stashed all this stuff, they actually went to my father's club and celebrated, to Cafe Liberty. And my father and his partner, Tony Lee, had a gold and silver exchange, and they fenced all the jewelry for Lufthansa. So they made me testify at that trial. He actually got found not guilty. So all told, I testified at 6 trials. Wow. Very high-level trials against 3 of the 5 families.
And these were all made in exchange for the murder charges that you had.
Right. When I got sentenced, the courtroom was full of FBI agents. They all came, to help me. And the judge even asked the U.S. attorney, who are all these people in the courtroom? And she said, those are all law enforcement. They came to support Mr. Ruggiano. And, so... Yeah.
Well, they don't realize when you proffer, right? When you come in a room and, like you said, you had to spill your guts, because if you leave one thing out, right? That's one thing everybody needs to understand. When you proffer, if you leave one thing out, they can come back and convict you on that years later.
When you agree to testify, you get what they call coverage. Mm-hmm. So I have to tell them about every crime I ever committed to my best of my recollection, whether I got arrested for them or not.
Right.
So I had to tell them about every crime I committed. And they give me coverage. So when I testify and I get cross-examined by the lawyers and I talk about crimes I committed, there's no statute of limitation. I have coverage for them. And that goes for murders or anything. I could talk about a murder I committed that I didn't even get arrested for, and they can't charge me with it because they're giving me coverage for it. So that's to protect me. So I had coverage for a lot of stuff.
It's in your best interest to be
And when the government gets a CW, cooperating witness like you, they're going to use you for every trial they can.
Trial.
And even if you weren't hands-on in a Lufthansa heist, they're going to use a guy like you to show credibility, to show history. So, when people look at you and go, oh, my God, you ratted against their... No, listen, that's the government using you as a tool to say, okay, listen, we're going to use you in 6 different trials. Right. Well, even though I wasn't covered, I wasn't connected to the Lufthansa heist, they're going to use you as a character witness or some kind of historical case against people. Right. You don't realize what you're really signing up for sometimes.
Yeah. They loaned me out too, like the Genovese trial, like Cyril Peron's trial. All I did with him was he told me when I got out of prison that he got promoted to captain, and he loaned me $15,000, but on a personal level. So they just wanted me to testify that he was a captain in the Genovese family to show he was a member of organized crime. So they loaned me out to the Genovese squad, because every mob family, as you know, has their own FBI squad.
Right.
So they loaned me out, and then they loaned me out to the Bananos family squad because I testified against Vinny Asara. All the other trials I testified at were all Gambino trials.
Right.
4 were Gambino trials, but 2 weren't. So I was loaned out to them. That's
for a while, was you looking over your shoulder, like pretty cautious?
You know, it's funny because everybody asks me that question. I was never really doing that. Like I didn't go back in my old neighborhood. I'm not going to disrespect them, like do that. I'm not going to put it in their faces. But like, who's going to come kill me? Blaze?
Right.
You know what I mean? The mob is so different. There's nobody going to plan a hit today like years ago. I think the last guy they went after was Sammy in Arizona, and they all got arrested anyway.
Right.
From what I understand now, the rule is that no more murders because there's too many informants, confidential informants. There's too much surveillance. I mean, there's cameras all over the place.
How's come only you guys got indicted? Because you said you got permission from your father, you got permission from the other family members.
Well, John was dead.
Okay.
My father was dead. Tony Lee was dead. Jeannie was doing 50 years in prison. I mean, when I cooperated, I told the government who was involved, and they only indicted. They didn't even indict Mikey Gal, and he locked the door.
Oh, he was a guy that's
Right. They only indicted Freddie DiCongilio. Dominic was already indicted with me. So that when I cooperated, the only other person that got indicted was Freddie, because he was there. He helped get rid of the body. The guy that's boat they used, this guy Big Tommy, they went to him. The feds went to him. They never indicted him either. And I don't know. That was on I don't know what they were doing, the FBI. That was on them. They just indicted who they indicted. They gave Mikey Gal a pass. I don't know why they did that, but they gave Mikey Gal a pass. So,
it's amazing to me that thinking back on the Frankie thing, and not to harp on it, but he was a high-level associate. He wasn't a made guy.
No.
And the hoops that you described they went through and all the meetings and sit-downs, okays. So, and from the stories I told you was a made guy, to kill a made guy, you go through that. A high-level associate, people don't understand. And again, my time inside the D Cavalcantes, when I was running my own crew and I had to go on record to being, like you said, a high-level associate, you don't realize. But this guy, it wasn't because they were trying to protect Frankie. It was their personal gains.
of course.
He was making money for them. And in the end, it was like he's not a made guy, but they're treating him with that kind of respect and making sure they dot all these I's and cross all these T's because it's good for their pockets.
Right.
It just shows you, again, the underworld is a vicious place.
Right. After Frankie disappeared, I was in Cerro Perón's club. He was a captain in the Genovese family who Frankie was around at one time before he hooked up my sister. And he had he used to tinker with things in his basement, Cerro, and I was down in his basement. I had to go see him about something, and he says, that kid Frankie, you never got my okay for that. So I looked and I go, come on, Cerro. I said, the deal? And he goes, yeah, well, the kid technically was around me.
Right.
Yeah.
He's looking for
but he didn't make a stink over it. He just says, you never got my okay for that. Technically, he was around me. I said, you're going to have to take that up with my own man, I told him. Yeah. And he just shuffed,
Because he's looking for a payout.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
He's looking for.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I should be compensated in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, but that's how it goes. That's how it goes. Listen, the mob, if you're bringing them a lot of money, like today, they get made, guys are getting made because they're making money.
Yeah,
there's no,
right.
Listen, so Charlie Wagons, he proposed my father. Listen to the guys he proposed. My father, he proposed a killer. John Gotti, he proposed a killer. Gene Gotti, he proposed a killer. Angelo Quack, he proposed a killer. Johnny Koenig, he proposed a killer. Everybody he proposed did work. In the mob, they call murder work. Right. When I went out, when my father was schooling me and we would go to bars or clubs, he would go to me, you see that guy over there? He's a good guy. Mm-hmm. That means he killed somebody. Mm-hmm. Or he would go, you see that guy over there? He did a lot of work. Because they call murder work. Because that's what it is. It's work.
Capable guys.
Right. And Charlie's claim to fame, you know what Charlie used to say? He used to tell guys, all the guys I proposed, all my guys got it the right way. Mm-hmm. Because they did work. Mm-hmm. But not money. It wasn't, they did work. But a lot of guys brought fat envelopes and got straightened out. Yeah. Like I know guys that got straightened out that never busted a grape. They just were bringing big fat envelopes to JoJo and everybody, and they got proposed.
Mm-hmm. And that really changed late 80s into the 90s. That's really when it changed. I would say late 80s, it was still, you had to be a capable guy and you still had to do some kind of deed. Right. And if it wasn't the ultimate deed, I think right before I had doing investigations in organized crime, it was, listen, if you went with him and did a bank robbery or something like that, you were, it's an act of violence.
So you're saying Frankie was bringing in money then?
Big money.
Yeah.
Frankie, when he did scores, Frankie was an armored car thief. They were robbing armored cars. Him and his friend Peter Sakara, they were dealing drugs. After I cooperated, the feds told me they never realized how many murders my brother-in-law was in on until Peter Sakara started cooperating.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And he was using your old man's name.
Of course. And in my old man's day, you had to commit a murder to get straightened out. When my old man went to jail during World War II, he went AWOL. Well, in that area, he stabbed he was in basic training. He was 18 years old. He was in basic training, and he had this sergeant, this Southern drill sergeant that was not abusing him, but calling racial slut, you guinea bastard. And so my old man waited one night for him to go into the latrine, and he went in and he stabbed him. He stabbed him up. And he hitchhiked back to Brooklyn. The guy lived. He hitchhiked back to Brooklyn, 18 years old. He goes back to Brooklyn. The feds go to my grandmother and tell my grandmother, if your son don't surrender, we're going to put him down as deserted during the war, and we're going to shoot him on sight. My grandmother makes him surrender. He goes to prison. He goes to Leavenworth. He does whatever he does. Time. He gets out. The war ends. He gets out. He goes back to jail again 6 months later to Sing Sing. He gets out, and he's robbing poker games with Tony Lee. He hooks up with Charlie Wagons. Now, this is my own man telling me the story. Because I started driving Charlie around. Charlie now is with the Mangano family. Albert Anastasia was the boss. So he says, we're in the bar. He goes, Charlie takes him out. Now, he's 24 years old. He's a kid. Charlie takes him outside the bar, and he tells him, if I ask you to kill somebody, would you do it and not ask no questions? This is my father telling me this story. Like, this is my childhood fairy tales.
Yeah.
Right? And he says, yeah. So I said, you said, yeah. He goes, yeah. I said, what happened? He goes, a week later, they picked me up by grandma's house because he still lived with his mother. He was 24 years old. He said, I looked like a baby. I didn't even shave. I had no hair. He goes, they picked me up by grandma's house. Charlie and this guy. And Danny, Charlie's brother Danny, was in a car behind them. He goes, and I got in the car with Charlie because now he looked like a kid, my father. So the guy didn't suspect anything. Yeah. Because I got in the back seat and Charlie pulled out. He said, and then I whispered in his ear. So me, like a dummy, I go, what do you mean you whispered in his ear? He goes, I whispered in his ear.
Whispered in his ear.
Right. Shot him in the head. Huh?
Shot him in the head. He whispered in his ear.
He's 24.
And he didn't even blink, my father, when he told me the story. So I says, were you nervous? He goes, he told me he was nervous that time. He goes, I was nervous the first time I did it, but after that, when I did it, I was never nervous again.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did get created for sure.
Yeah. That was my childhood. Yeah, that was my upbringing. You know, I mean, listen, he did what he knew how to do. You know, he took me to baseball games. He taught me how to play baseball. He taught me how to box. I was getting bullied in school when I was a kid. He brought a heavy bag home and he started teaching me how to throw punches. And then he stopped my mother. And then for me to learn how to fight. So my mother, I used to come out of school and my mother would be waiting for me, and I'd run to my mother because I didn't want to get beat up. And then one day I came out of school and my mother wasn't there. So it was either get beat up or fight. So I started fighting. Mm-hmm. And then later on I found out the reason why my mother wasn't there was because my father told my mother, where you going? She goes, I'm going to pick Anthony. Because no, you ain't picking Anthony up no more. Anthony's going to have to learn how to fight.
He wanted you to fight your way out of it.
Yeah, and I had to learn how to fight. Otherwise, keep getting beat up.
Mm-hmm. I think it was like that across the board. It's partial the neighborhood you grew up in. The environment, again, I'm third generation police. But we grew up the same way. And we grew up in the street knowing that, listen, that's the way our fathers raised us. Yeah. But your father, like you said, that's the cards that he was dealt in life. Right. We hear that a lot, right? He's one of many guys that, look, he determined that this is my craft. This is what I do.
That's what he believed. He believed in the mob. His father died when he was 8, and his friends' fathers were all mobbed up.
Okay.
So he grew up in their houses, so he always was around mob guys, like his whole life.
Yeah, the violence and
he was around guys that were in Murders Incorporated. Like, these guys got the electric chair. They got, like the guy that got thrown out of the window, Abe Rellis, gave these guys up. Like, they were Murder Inc. They were the guys.
And it's just, that culture was different. They truly looked out for each other, and your father was brought into that, and he knew, like,
your dad stand at drill sergeant at 18 years old. I mean,
but
he came up hard for sure. Yeah.
And people,
and he passed that on to you. It's a
continuation. People ask me all the time, what was the downfall of the mob? And part of my answer is that people got to understand. My father's generation, and even John Gotti's generation, they came from poverty.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They ate pigeons and squirrels. Mm-hmm. Like, my father was a scavenger. He whatever you put in front of him, he ate pigeons, squirrels. He ate. They came from poverty. Mm-hmm. They wore different color socks. I mean,
survival for
cold
them.
water flats with no heat. They came from poverty. So later on, when the books got opened, and throughout the years, we were middle class. We didn't come from poverty. We were soft compared to them. Then the people started cooperating, because they were soft. They came from poverty.
Yep.
They used to eat macaronis mixed with everything because they couldn't afford meat. My father mixed pasta with everything. You name it, he mixed it with, and it was delicious because they couldn't afford meat. Mm-hmm. So, that's why they stuck together, because they knew what it was to have nothing, and to keep what they had to stick together. The last time I saw my father, I was in prison. I was in Elmira State Prison. It was 1998. He came up to visit me. Yeah. Was sitting in the visiting room, and he tells me, I'm opening up a fruit and vegetable exchange. He said, it's going to be for you when you get out. I said, for me? So what am I going to do with a fruit? What do I know about fruit and vegetables?
It was something legit.
I said, what are you talking about? He went partners with these guys in Philly. He goes, because this is the deal. He goes, it's all over for us. I said, what are you talking about? He said, the two things that we had going for us are gone. He said, everybody feared us and nobody cooperated. He goes, and nobody fears us no more and everybody's cooperating. He goes, it's all over.
So he was looking out for you. He was trying to set you up for success.
Yeah. Then he died.
I think that was his way of saying sorry. And I'm curious, did your dad ever look at you and say, I'm sorry?
Never.
Yeah, I figured that, but
Never.
No, because in his mind, again, it's that mindset.
In his mind, we were 100% right.
Yeah.
We did.
yeah.
When I started working for him, when I was a kid, he used to tell me, don't ever feel sorry for the public. They deserve, this was the exact word, I could curse, right? He used to tell me, don't ever feel sorry for the public. They deserve every fucking they get for voting for these people. So don't ever feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
And listen, we pillaged and plundered New York City. When I was in the street, every waking moment, I was awake, I was committing crimes. I was thinking about my whole life revolved around committing crimes. And even when we did legitimate things, we committed crimes because we used it to commit crimes.
Yeah.
And that was it. Between 84 and 88 were really dark days for me. I really dark. Once when I got clean and I started putting things back together again, like I did in the early 70s, when I started putting things back together again, I had crew. I would wake up in the morning and there was a bakery in my neighborhood on Liberty Avenue that made breakfasts. These old ladies, they loved me. I would go in there every morning and I would sit there. I used to read 2 newspapers a day, the Post and the News, every day. That was my routine. I'd go there, I'd order my cup of coffee, they make me my egg sandwich, and I would sit there and everybody would come and meet me. All the guys, they would come and meet me. And we had one crew. So I was getting credit cards from the post office. Stacks of credit cards from this guy Piccolo from the post office. So I had one crew. We had a van. I had one crew. They went out and banged out the credit cards. Then we had another crew that worked in the chop shops. They would come and we would, you got the cars. The cars are here because the cars, we used to park the stolen cars in the neighborhood and then drive them to the garage to chop them up. And we would tell them where the cars was and they would go chop the cars up. And this is, so
every day.
And then at night, then we would collect then we would collect the money. Then I had my route. I had a vending company, all gambling machines. I mean, I had
Well, they were
legitimate
Joker
machines.
Pokers, right? Some were legit and some were the Joker Pokers.
I had Pac-Man machines.
Yeah, you flipped it.
I had and you flip it and it became a Joker Poker machine or an 8-line machine. So when the cops came, you just hit the button and it went back to being a Pokemon machine. You know what I mean?
Right.
So everything I did was illegal.
How is it outside the mob? Now you're living clean and straight. Like
it's
a struggle.
It's hard. It's not hard. It's different. Like at work, sometimes I'll get like a really like bad client and they'll start cursing at me or calling me names, and I just look at them. I go, man, you don't know what I want to do to you right now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I just walk away. It's sometimes it's hard to like just sit there and not do nothing. Like let things go over your head.
Right.
And the things I missed all the money. I mean, I miss not waiting online. Like I miss going to concerts and sitting in the front row.
Yeah, the celebrity part of it, right?
And I miss all that. Yeah, I miss all that.
I'll agree with you there, Anthony, on a personal level because I was relocated right after I did my infiltration, and there's a lot of stuff you take for granted. Thanksgivings, Christmas, going to get the pies, going to get the bread, going to get everything that you want, and it's your culture. You lose part of. And the people, the culture and the people you miss. And people don't realize, they go, oh, you just flipped and you became. No, there's this whole sacrifice that goes along with it, right? Yes, it's to save yourself from doing jail time, but you don't realize what's on the other side of it.
Right.
The emotional damage you do to yourself. And because I know, every Thanksgiving comes, or every Christmas, and I'm sitting there eating shitty bread or eating some garbage pie.
Exactly.
My wife is always the one to remind me. This used to be fun. I used to have everything from back, and then say I used to have everything from back home. We don't have that anymore.
When you live in Idaho and you can't get a good like I was living in Michigan, and my daughter, I go to this like exclusive Italian restaurant in Detroit, right? So I'm sitting there with my daughter and the waitress comes over to take our order. So I order something and she tells me, what kind of noodles would you like? So now my daughter's dying. She knows I'm going to say something. And I go, noodles. I said, noodles are what you put in chicken soup.
Yeah.
I told her. I said, you mean what kind of macaronis do I want or pasta?
Yeah.
I said, you have rigatonis? My daughter was dying. She goes, oh, I'm sorry, son. You know, that's what I miss. I miss the food. You know, I miss my old neighborhood sometimes.
Right.
But then I think of it, you know, but look what I gave up to be in that life.
Yes.
The last time I went to prison, my daughter was 3. I came out when she was 11. My son was 13. I came out when he was 21. You know, my Christmas mornings were on the phone and my wife narrating my daughter running down the steps open. That was my Christmas mornings, you know. So look what I gave up for that life. You know, I gave up everything. I gave up my kids. I gave up my freedom, you know. And I'll tell you a little story what happened too. When I really felt like nasty and dirty and uncomfortable, 9/11.
Yeah.
I'm in Schuylkill Federal Prison, and I'm walking around the yard with this guy, Kevin Kelly, who is a Westie. I know you know, I'm sure you know who the Westies are, right? And we're walking the yard, and there's a guy, a Hell's Angel guy, Mike, in front of us walking the yard. And he's got his headphones on, but me and Kevin are talking, and he says, oh man, a plane just hit the World Trade Center. So Kevin, who lives in Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen, says, oh man, it must be one of them stupid tourist planes.
Yeah.
And then we're walking around, and then another guy goes, oh man, another plane hit and then all of a sudden, the compound is closed. The compound is closed. Everybody report back to their units, right? So now none of us know what's going on. We go down, we walk to the gate, the COs are there, and I'm there with this guy, Willie, and a couple of us, and Kevin says to the CO, what's going on? He says, they just flew 2 jets into the World Trade Center. Now this guy, Willie's next to me, he goes, oh my God, my son works there. His son got killed. They wouldn't even let him go to the
he's
funeral.
in prison.
Yeah, he was in jail. He came from Jersey. Now we go back into the units and we're watching it on TV and everything's going on and the tower's full. Boom, they go down. Now I'm standing underneath the TV with a bunch of wise guys, mob guys. Now later on they put up the figure 250 NYPD officers are missing. And now we're in front of the TV and we're watching the TV. And one of the wise guys says to another wise guy, more fucking cops should have ran in that building. Even today, I looked at him and I go, is there something wrong with you? I felt so dirty.
Yeah.
Like, and because, you know, in my heart, I knew my father would agree with him because they hated cops. I felt so fucking dirty. I said, you know, I used to go in that building with my kids, you jerk off.
Yeah.
And he goes, who you talking to? I said, I'm talking to you. Them cops ran in there to help people.
Yeah.
My friend Joey Amatucci just got killed in that. One of my best friends got killed in that. My other friend Louis Jehovah's son-in-law got. I said, I know people that died in that are dead now. I go. That he said, I wish more cops would have ran in that. And I got goosebumps. I felt so dirty that I was involved in that life because I knew. That's what I knew. My father would feel the same way. If you know, I knew he would feel the same way.
That's when you know you broke the cycle,
without a doubt.
Right?
Yeah.
You know,
it was just. It was.
Yeah.
It impacted you, hit you, and you're locked in prison.
You know, you know, like how do you say? You know, how do you? You know, I couldn't fathom. Like I never got to that point. I mean, I didn't care about a lot of things, but that I started developing a conscience. You know what I mean?
And then some of the stories we covered, Anthony. You know, Sal Polisi, who was an associate in the street at the same time as you were out there running around. He's been a guest on the show here. But can you go into a little more? Did you cross paths with Sal a lot?
Did I cross? Sal Polisi lived up the block from me. Sal Polisi and I share a nephew. My brother has a son with Sal Polisi's sister-in-law, my nephew Albert, who's actually here in Vegas with me. So yeah, I know Sal all my life. He lived up the block from me. He was a thief, a drug dealer. He actually was one of the best coke connections I ever had because he never charged me. He gave me all the coke for free.
Okay.
Yeah. But he was a character. He had a club around the corner from my house called the Sinatra Club.
Yes.
I lived on 88th Street. The club was on 87th Street. So I knew him since I was a kid. I knew him since he moved into Ozone Park. I knew his guy Dominic Cataldo. He was friends of ours. So Sal was he was a hijacker.
Yeah.
He was he was a knockaround guy. He made a lot of money. He had a lot. My father didn't care for him. My father didn't like him at all.
Yeah, but you find ways of just working with people.
Yeah,
surviving around them.
Yeah.
Navigating through the.
Yeah, he was just he actually was one of the first people to ever cooperate and go into the witness protection program in our neighborhood. He was like one of the first guys to do it, to flip.
So, just to wrap up, Anthony, I mean, again, for me, the story of redemption that you have, you sitting in this chair and using all your, sharing your experiences and where you're at today, your mistakes, your mishaps and regrets. But I don't know, I think in my personal opinion, if you were to be laid to rest beside your father, he's in a different place now and a different mindset. So that's just my opinion, being from the similar cultures. And I think that's long past. He's a different man now and he's in a different place. Tell us what you're doing today. I know you're doing the recovery stuff and my hat's off to you for that, but you have your podcast.
Yeah, so I have a podcast called Reformed Gangsters. I have a Patreon page, which I just revamped. So for $1, you could come on my page, reformedgangsters.com, and you could check out my videos. I have a lot of content that I don't talk about. I revealed a lot of stuff here today, but it's okay. Yeah. And for $1, you could check out my content. And if you like what you see, become a member. And I talk about a whole thing. I talk about the mob. I talk about recovery. I talk about politics. Once a month, I go live twice a week. People can come on and ask me questions. So yeah, check out my Patreon page, reformedgangsters.com. And we could have a person-to-person conversation.
Yeah, awesome. And again, thank you for coming here today. Thank you for sharing that your perspective, your news stories. That I don't know if you shared some of them. You might have given us some nuggets. Yeah. You might have gave away too much.
I gave you a few nuggets.
We'll take them. Yeah. And just letting us know what it's like inside the life as a kid growing up. We've had some guests, and Frankie Calabrese was one of those guys, and he discussed his relationship with his father. But I think he gave us a little bit of a different perspective, and we really thank you for making the time to come here today on Inside the Life.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I had a good time. Thank you.
For behind-the-scenes photos, merchandise, and exclusive content, visit InsideTheLife.org. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get podcasts.